Hello and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 46 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult end-of-life decisions. Also, this podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Welcome to this week's show. Please relax, get yourself a handful of something sweet or something healthy or both. And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me as we continue with our series titled Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Cancer, but Didn't Have Anyone to Ask, with a conversation about how cancer is staged. Like the BBC, we see our show as offering entertainment, enlightenment, and education, and divide that into three halves to address each of these goals. Our main topic is in the second half, so feel free to fast forward to that loose lip free zone. In the first half, Charlie has our recipe of the week and an excerpt from Anna Quindlen's A Short Guide to a Happy Life. In the second half, I'm going to continue our cancer series with a discussion about what it means when you hear the staging of a cancer diagnosis. And in the third half, Charlie has a letter attributed to David Bowie.
In our first half, the Everyone Dies road trip takes us to the state where Rosa Parks sparked the Montgomery bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955. Alabama's official state dance is the square dance and holds the world record for the most barbecue smoked pork sandwiches made in 1 hour. Alabama Lane Cake is said to have originated in Clayton, Alabama, when its creator, Emma Rylander Lane, won a prize for it in the state fair. It's a sweet concoction of white sponge cake, pecans, bourbon-soaked raisins, bourbon, cherries, and coconut. It's the state's official dessert and gets a mention in Harper Lee's classic To Kill a Mockingbird. The novel makes reference to the cake when Atticus's sister, Miss Maudie, comes to stay with the family. The reference highlights how Miss Maudie won't share her special recipe and isn't shy when pouring in the liquor. Young Scout mentions that Miss Maudie Atkinson baked a Lane cake so loaded with shinny, it made me tight. And now you, our loyal listeners, can prepare this cake for your next funeral lunch and everyone in attendance can feel tight. Bon appetit. And now for something completely different. I have an excerpt from the book A Short Guide to a Happy Life by writer Anna Quindlen, the best-selling novelist and columnist. In it, she reflects on what it takes to get a life, to live deeply every day and from your own unique self, rather than merely to exist through your days. I'm not particularly qualified by profession or education to give advice and counsel. It's widely known in a small circle that I make a mean tomato sauce, and I know many inventive ways to hold a baby while nursing, although I haven't had the opportunity to use any of them in years. I have a good eye for a nice swatch and a surprising paint chip, and I have a checkered but occasionally successful sideline in matchmaking. But I've never earned a doctorate or even a master's degree. I'm not an ethicist or a philosopher or an expert in any particular field. Each time I give a commencement speech, I feel like a bit of a fraud. Yogi Berra's advice seems as good as any. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. I can't talk about the economy or the universe or academe, as academicians like to call where they work when they're feeling kind of grand. I'm a novelist. My work is human nature. Real life is really all I know. Don't ever confuse the two. Your life and your work. That's why I have to say, The second is only a part of the first. Don't ever forget what a friend once wrote to Senator Paul Tsongas when the senator had decided not to run for re-election because he'd been diagnosed with cancer. No man ever said on his deathbed, "I wish I had spent more time at the office." Don't ever forget the words on a postcard that my father sent me last year. If you win the rat race, you're still a rat. Or what John Lennon wrote before he was gunned down in the driveway of the Dakota. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. That's the only advice I can give. After all, when you look at the faces of a class of graduating seniors, you realize that each student has only one thing that no one else has. When you leave college, there are thousands of people out there with the same degree you have. When you get a job, there will be thousands of people doing what you want to do for a living. But you are the only person alive who has sole custody of your life, your particular life, your entire life. Not just your life at a desk, or your life on the bus, or in the car, or at the computer. Not just the life of your mind, but the life of your heart. Not just your bank account, but your soul. Please go to our webpage for this week's recipe for Alabama Lane Cake and additional resources for this program. Everyone Dies is offered at no cost, but is not free to produce. Can we count on you to contribute? Your tax-deductible gift will go directly to supporting our nonprofit journalism so that we can remain accessible to everyone. You can also donate at www.everyonedies.org or at our site on Patreon, www.patreon.com, and search for Everyone Dies. And our address again, www.every1dies.org. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie. All cancer diagnoses follow pretty much the same path. If you go to your healthcare practitioner with any symptom, they will typically do a physical exam, blood and urine tests to see if there are any abnormalities, perhaps an X-ray, CAT scan, or MRI to look at your organs and bones, and possibly a biopsy of the area to look at the cells. Our focus today is to help you understand the cancer staging system. Cancer staging is a way to communicate the extent of a cancer in the body so that everyone involved is speaking the same language. But it's often not clearly explained to the person receiving the information. I've had patients tell me how glad they are that their cancer is only a stage 4. My next question to them is, how many stages are there? Likely because we are familiar with base 10 system, they tell me 10 stages. Usually they then look at me and say, right? And I say, no, there are 4 stages. Which after that sinks in, they realize the severity of stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Since I don't want that to happen to you, let's go over the stages. The stages of disease measures how far a cancer has spread from where it started. So, for purposes of our talk, let's say someone is being evaluated for stomach cancer. So if we're looking at spread from the origin, we want to know how far the cancer has spread outside of the stomach. The staging system used by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Cancer Institute is called summary stage. Summary stage categorizes cancers as localized, regional, or distant. Localized stomach cancer is confined to the stomach. Regional cancer has spread directly beyond the stomach, called regional extension, or to regional lymph nodes. The distant cancer has spread to other organs besides the stomach, distant extension, or to remote lymph nodes. Most cancers are staged except for just a couple exceptions. The first exception is liquid tumors. These are blood cancers and leukemias. Because they're already circulating through the entire body, they are described as active or in remission. The second exception are brain tumors, because they may have spread to other parts of the central nervous system. They rarely spread to organs or to lymph nodes or other parts of the body. Instead, the tumor cells are graded from 1 to 4 to describe how different they look from normal cells. Grade 4 cells look the most abnormal. And the third is small cell lung cancer, is usually described simply as either limited stage or extensive stage. Limited stage disease means the cancer is confined to the chest. Extensive disease means it's extended outside the chest. Other than that, cancer stages go from 0 to 4. Our organs are made up of multiple cell layers, all stacked on top of each other. Think of it like a 7-layer dip, except you can't stir all the layers together. So let's continue to look at the stomach as an example. The mucosa is the innermost layer of the stomach wall. When we eat, the food coasts along the mucosa. The mucosa is made of both epithelial cells and glandular cells. The glandular cells make mucus to protect the stomach lining and digestive juices to help break down food. Most stomach cancers start in glandular cells of the mucosa and are called adenocarcinomas. Cancer found in this area only is stage 0. So stage 0 is, you might also hear it referred to as carcinoma in situ, is stage 0, or you might also hear it referred to as carcinoma in situ of the stomach. This means that abnormal cells are found only in the mucosa. These abnormal cells may become cancer and spread into nearby normal tissue. It also might be called high-grade dysplasia of the stomach, meaning that there are several abnormal cells in the inner lining of the stomach. So that's stage 0. The next layer of the stomach is called the submucosa, or right under the mucosa, and it is the layer of connective tissue between the mucosa and the muscle layer. It contains blood vessels, lymph vessels, and nerve cells. Under that is the muscle layer. The muscle layer flexes and helps the stomach mix food with digestive juices and move it into the small intestine where the nutrients are absorbed. So this is the area where you'll see stage 1 or localized stomach cancer. Stage 1 stomach cancer usually means that the cancer hasn't spread beyond the thick muscle of the stomach wall, but may have moved to 1 or 2 nearby lymph nodes. Now, to remind you, lymph nodes are small bean-shaped structures that are part of the body's immune system. Lymph nodes filter substances that travel through the lymphatic fluid, and they contain the white blood cells that help the body fight infection and disease. Now, there are hundreds of lymph nodes, or you might hear them called lymph glands, found throughout the body. They're all connected to one another by lymph vessels. So if you think of like a bunch of grapes that are all hanging on the vine. Clusters of lymph nodes are found in the neck, under your arm, chest, abdomen, groin. For example, there are about 20 to 40 lymph nodes in the armpit alone. There are approximately 600 lymph nodes in your body as an adult. So stage 2, called locally advanced cancer or early stage cancer, this means that the cancer has spread into and through the muscle layer of the stomach, and it might have spread into 15 nearby lymph nodes. So you can see how this is going. If it stays right in the inner lining, that mucosa, it's a 0. It hasn't grown. It hasn't moved. And then stage 1, it's moving, but it hasn't gone beyond the thick muscle. Stage 2, it's gone through the muscle and also into lymph nodes. So the next layer after the muscle is called the subserosa, which is a thin layer of connective tissue between the muscle layer and the wall, the outer wall of the stomach, which is the serosa. When you take the skin off of a chicken and you see those white strands connecting the chicken skin to the chicken meat? That's the subserosa. Last is the serosa, which is the outermost layer of the stomach wall. It's the outside of the organ. So if you were to pick up the stomach and hold it in your hand, what's laying against your hand is the serosa. So stage 3, locally advanced cancer or late stage cancer, means that the cancer has grown into or through the muscle or the outer layer, the stomach wall of the stomach. It might have spread to 16 or more lymph nodes, or the cancer has spread to nearby organs such as the spleen, colon, the liver, the diaphragm, the pancreas, the abdomen wall, the adrenal gland, the kidney, or small intestines, or the back of the abdomen. So that's stage 3, locally advanced. And the final stage is stage 4, and this is called metastatic, in our case, stomach cancer. Stage 4 stomach cancer has spread into nearby organs or body structures. It has spread to distant body parts such as the lung, liver, distant lymph nodes, and the tissue that lines the abdomen wall. Metastatic cancer happens when cancer cells travel through the lymphatic system or blood and form tumors in other parts of the body. The metastatic tumor is the same type of cancer as the primary tumor. For example, if stomach cancer spreads to the lung, the cancer cells in the lung are actually stomach cancer cells. The disease is called metastatic stomach cancer, not lung cancer. And just when you thought you might have a handle on cancer staging, I need to add that each of these stages, 1 through 4, are then further broken down into 3 categories, A, B, or C. These are further details about the stage, and there is a link in the show notes where you can see how detailed this part of the category becomes. I'm only going to give you an example because it's mind-boggling. So, as an example, if the diagnosis is stage 1A, the cancer has formed in the mucosa and may have spread to the submucosa. But if the cancer is stage 1B, that means the cancer is formed in the mucosa, may have spread to the submucosa, and has spread to 1 or 2 nearby lymph nodes, or the cancer has formed in the mucosa and has spread to the muscle layer. So, look at the reference for these final points because they're hard to follow without really seeing them in writing. But I want you to know how detailed cancer staging is. And I've seen this news being given to patients where they say, well, you have stage 3, C, stomach cancer. And all you really hear at that point is you've got cancer and it's in your stomach. 3C, what I see is very few patients stop and say, so wait a minute, what does that mean? Because their mind is like too worried and concerned about the fact that it's a cancer diagnosis. But then you then get home and you say, well, I'm going to Google this. And it's really hard to understand. So that's why I wanted to break it down for you as much as I could. So look at those references, and it might help you too with the A, B, and C part. Now, lastly, there's a classification system called TNM. The way oncologists talk about tumor categories is called TNM, which stands for, the T is tumor, and that describes the size of the primary tumor and its invasion into nearby tissues with the ranges of 0 to 4. The N part is node, which is lymph node involvement of the tumor, and ranges from 0, no lymph node spread, to 3, which is 7 or more regional lymph nodes involved. And the M part is when the tumor stands for metastasis, which is when the tumor spreads beyond the primary organ. A tumor is classified as M0 if no distant metastasis is present, and M1 if there's evidence of distant metastasis. So, a classification of T3, N2, M0. I'll say it again for you. T3, N2, M0 means the tumor has invaded into the subserosa, the T3 part. There are 4 to 6 regional lymph nodes involved, the N2 part, and no metastasis, the M0 part. What that would translate to, if you were looking at the staging system, is that T3, N2, M0 corresponds to stage 2 locally advanced cancer, late stages. Now, I know this is a lot to take in, but this is the language of cancer. And if you know someone with cancer, it's useful for you to have at least a basic understanding of what is being said. But be sure to look at the show notes, especially if you learn things better by seeing them. You can listen to this again, look at the references where you can also see all of this that I'm talking about. But it gives you a way to at least have a beginning understanding of, well, first off, I guess, how complicated cancer staging is, how detailed it is, because each of these stages correspond to what treatment is going to be recommended. So, and we'll talk about that part in a different podcast. But right now, this is cancer staging. Charlie, you got any questions?
Well, Marianne, you're I'll never look at a chicken the same way again. But yeah, your description of those, yeah, and I'm just sitting here thinking because I had chicken last night, and yeah, those little stringy things. Um, hmm. You said about not feeling anything. Yeah, I mean, I've read about things, people feeling fine, then one day they don't feel fine, and they've had cancer, it's grown, it really can't be treated, and they die maybe, a few weeks later. Because as you were saying, they're like, 4 levels, and at 4 levels, most people feel something in their body changing. They go to the doctor, and then the doctor says, yeah, you have cancer. Let's see what we can do about it. And other times, by that time it can't be treated, or it's just very difficult to treat it. Am I making sense?
Eye-Opening Moments podcasts are real-life stories of adversity, encounters, and perspectives. They are moments that can lift your spirits, give you some food for thought, or move you. For the introspective mind that likes to reflect, discover, and find solutions or meaning in a complex life, listen to Eye-Opening Moments podcasts.
Well, stage 4 cancer, while it can't be cured,
Mm-hmm.
they may do interventions to slow it. They may have clinical trials that you can be involved in.
Okay.
There are some people who it's so widely metastasized, I mean, it's gone to so many places that it's very rare for, let me put it this way, it's
Okay.
very rare for an oncologist not to offer something. Then the question becomes, what are you trading off for that something? Because, and we'll talk about chemotherapy, and we'll talk about surgery, and we'll talk about radiation. You know, a lot of things can be done. The question might be, should it? Should that be something that or is it something that you want to spend your time doing?
Right.
And the question then becomes asking the oncologist, well, okay, so if I do this, what can I expect for increasing the length of my life? And we know from the research that, you know, depending on the intervention and depending on the type of cancer, it might be an additional 3 days.
Okay.
You know, because they do studies. So then you look at it and you say, okay, well, I've got to drive to the cancer center. I have to have a port put in. I have to do this. I have to do that. And I'm extending my life 3 days, but I'm giving up all these other days to go do this intervention. And some people might say, that's just not worth it. Some people might say, I'll do anything for those extra 3 days. So it's a question of your values and that kind of thing. But hopefully, as people listen to this and they, you know, hear about the symptoms of cancer or that kind of thing, that they say, oh, you're losing an awful lot of weight. You're not trying. Have you gone to talk to your doctor? You know, or we've done shows on ovarian cancer that's diagnosed very late because women and their doctors will say, oh, well, it's normal. You're getting older. Yeah, you know, your belly's getting a little bit bigger, but, you know, watch what you're eating, when in fact it's ovarian cancer. So our point in being here is to say to people, here are the early signs of these things.
Oh,
And
okay.
it should be a red flag for you to go in to your doctor and say, here's what I think, or here's what I'm wondering. You know, you mentioned Paul Tsongas and Anna Quindlen's thing.
Right.
I don't know if you remember when I lived in Lowell, Paul Tsongas lived right next door to me.
Oh, that's
And
right. Sure. Yeah.
he was diagnosed with cancer because, well, not because, but he was taking a shower and he felt his lymph nodes under his armpit. He was like, what's this? And he went to the doctor, and that's how he was diagnosed, as
Okay.
opposed to blowing it off and saying,
Right.
I don't know, you know. So it's a question of knowing your body, knowing something's different, and not being, we did this show about gaslighting, remember?
Right.
And, people go to the doctor, and sometimes the doctor will say, well, it's nothing. And, and you're going to say, well, no, I don't agree with that. I really think that I should get a CAT scan or something because I'm really concerned about this. If you're really concerned about it, don't put your head in the sand and insist that you want to be evaluated.
Yeah. Advocate for yourself. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for educating me, Marianne. That's very clear now. Even I get it. So, okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
For our third half, a letter attributed to David Bowie, who died on January 10, 2016 from liver cancer at age 69. I will die. I know there are only a few months left until the end of my earthly journey. What should I do? Despair, sink into depression, reject the idea of death, and pretend the illness doesn't exist? Or should I decide to defeat death? I decided with my soul because only the soul and the heart give me the inspiration to compose music, as I've done for 50 years. I count the hours I have left, and as the doctors tell me, I can predict, within a certain margin, the date of my death. The release of my last work is scheduled for January 8, 2016, my 69th birthday. I work day and night. I have the time to compose, perfect, perform, record in the studio, and make videos. I do it as quickly as possible because I don't want my face to show the mark of death, which mockingly is cutting down my body without me being able to defend myself. But I challenge you, death. The hell with it if I don't challenge you. I challenged and conquered the world of fans in the 70s with the pride of ambiguity. I loved men and women. I was a man, a woman, an alien, and finally, a celestial body. What can you do, death, against my eternity, my genius, my madness, my creativity, my music that will last forever? I am Lazarus, torn from the scars. I will die in the body, but I will live forever through my music. I lived long enough to receive birthday wishes. I thought I wouldn't make it to see my album released. I survived January 8th, and you, my dear killer, lost. Just think if you hadn't knocked on my door, I would have created 24 works. I would have managed to live to 100, and instead, thanks to you, I have 25. You know, I will be free as a bird. And folks, that's it for this week's episode. Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, and from David Bowie, confront a corpse at least once. The absolute absence of life is the most disturbing and challenging confrontation you will ever have.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.